Today I'm going to be having a little bit of a rant about marketing attribution. So very quickly, in a nutshell, marketing attribution is the process of assigning value to the different touch points that a user might encounter in their journey. That's very simply, that's all we're trying to do. And I don't know how many of you have kind of read a lot on the subject, how many of you feel like you have a really good grasp on attribution, you understand it. Oliver, naturally, of course. I don't know, I still get a little bit unsure of what we're trying to do from time to time. And I'll tell you why. It's because we have lots of information out there, people talking about this. I saw this brilliant tweet the other day saying that attribution is all about unlocking insights that are actionable and making better data-driven decisions. You're clear on that? Yeah. That's attribution. And it gets worse. These are all literally within the last 48 hours, all of these tweets. There's some brilliant ones. What good is big data without big attribution? I read that and I still don't know what it means. The Internet of Things is disrupting marketing attribution, and marketing ROI will never be the same again. I'm still not quite sure. I read every single one of these and all of them have very nice explanations of what attribution is. They have, some of them go as far as maybe going into Google Analytics and explaining all of the different attribution models in there. And a lot of them kind of end with the conclusion that the attribution models in Google Analytics maybe aren't the best way of looking at things, and nowadays, in 2017, there's much better ways that us marketers should be looking at it. And a lot of you may have heard of data-driven attribution. They're all saying, yeah, data-driven attribution is the way we need to go. So just when it's getting exciting, you're thinking, great, how are they going to tell me how to do a data-driven attribution? Where do I go? What tool do I use? Who are the big players in the market? And the articles just end there. And I don't know whether you come across this, but I find it frustrating. There's nobody really out there who's shouting about how you do data-driven attribution, giving you really tangible examples of how to get started on the topic, the first piece of analysis you can do to get you started down that road. And that's kind of unique for pretty much every topic in marketing analysis. You can Google a blog out there and there'll be someone giving you a really detailed guide of do this, do that, and here's how to begin with this type of analysis. Attribution to me feels like a bit of an exception. But anyway, after reading through all of these different articles about attribution recently, these are the promises that I kind of extracted from all the information. Attribution modeling promises to help us understand the impact of communications on business metrics. It promises to provide a holistic and accurate information about the financial return on marketing activities. Helps us better understand the customer journey, but also understanding how consumers are engaging with our brand. And they're all, they're admirable goals. Why wouldn't you want to do these things? They all make sense. So how do we do it? I will start off by saying that there are some good things. There's some brilliant things, and Google Analytics is always a nice place to start. You've got the multi-channel reports, the conversion reports, which look at a user's interaction. So not just one single visit, but the combination of multiple visits to a website. So looking at users, which is it's a great way of looking at things. And I really like this last column here, which is the ratio of assisted to last click conversions in Google Analytics, and this can be broken down by channel here. I think this is really overlooked sometimes. In its current form, it's not very nice to look at, so I quite often like to lay it out like this. You can put it horizontally left to right. And if you annotate that, you've got the number 1 here, and 1 means that the channel assisted just as many conversions as it was the last point in a user's path. Further to the left of this means that it's direct response. It's very bottom of the funnel. It's the last click. And then the further right we get means the more supportive that channel is. And when you lay it out like this, it suddenly gets quite interesting. You maybe have some ideas, some hypotheses. So organic search, I'm starting to think, okay, well, if that's the consumer's first touch point, they're seeing us in organic search for the first time, maybe that's where we need to make a big brand impression. We need to get them remembering the brand name so that they come back further down the funnel, and we can get them with our brand campaigns and so on. And then further down here, there's referral, which is more of a mid-funnel type source in this particular instance. So you might be thinking, okay, well, referrals are kind of, potentially that's people reading up information about the product. Let's find out more about who these referrers are. You can intuitively look at this. It takes maybe 10 minutes to do this. And you can start to get some ideas, and this is great. Even better, one thing that we often overlook when we talk about attribution, we're often thinking marketing channels, but you can attribute, I prefer to think of it as touch points, and you can even kind of have subsets as well. You don't necessarily need to look at the whole website. So this particular example is looking at AdWords campaigns. So you're just looking at paid media interaction, and you can do the same thing. You can look at the assisted and last click conversions, the ratio between the two. and you can start to identify kind of upper and lower funnel campaigns, and that might give you some ideas around how you might adjust that ad copy, whether one is more appropriate for building retargeting lists, and you can start to build a sequence of events that you might expect a consumer to go through. The other thing that I'm sure you've heard a lot about attribution is that last click is bad. You can solve this obviously by going into Google Analytics and you just pick a different model, position based, why not? Wait for it to load, problem solved. But not quite. The problem with the different attribution models that are provided in Google Analytics and other similar tools is that they're static. They apply a rule or a set of rules upon all of your traffic. So it's basically saying that every single customer thinks and performs and consumes in the same way. Last click makes the assumption that every single interaction a consumer had with your brand before they purchased had no impact whatsoever. They had no impression on that person. That's obviously not true. So that's the big argument against last click. It makes complete sense. But then when you start looking at other models, so first click, for example, that the first touch point that a consumer had is the only important event because none of the others would have happened after that if that first point wasn't there. We don't know whether that's true because they may well have come in one of the other channels. Position-based, likewise, that they were all equally important could be complete nonsense. We're always applying an assumption about how consumers convert the minute we start using one of these models. And inevitably, when you start looking at this more, you start to realize that none of the models are any better than other. Last click is what we use typically because it's intuitive. People understand last click. It's very simple. And attribution promises a way of diving deeper into that and better understanding the consumer. One of the reasons you mentioned that social and display, for example, are common topics when you're talking about different attribution models because they're not favored very much by this last click modeling because they're typically higher up the funnel and then other channels might steal the credit further down the line. But attribution modeling is not about trying to make your channel look more favorable and trying to make sure that it looks like a good investment to the client so that they'll increase their budget in display a little bit more, or they might pay for a social media campaign. That's not the aim here. The aim is, as we looked at the points earlier, is to better understand your consumer, better understand how they're consuming, so in turn we can improve our marketing and create greater efficiencies. So we mentioned data-driven attribution before, and the idea behind this is really sound, and the idea is to try and tackle the flaws of these static models that we just spoke about. That we use known data, so the observed data that we have, to build statistical models that accurately attribute credit based on the observed merit of each touch point in a path. This is great, but there's a few flaws. When we're talking about the observed merit of each touch point, how many touch points do you think we've got? We need to observe the consumer buying process to attribute credit to all the different things that they do within that. But reality is that we can only observe a tiny little bit of the buying process. If we think about how do you shop online, you might go on Facebook, you see a cool new product, something on Kickstarter maybe, you think that's a great idea. Go and Google a bit and you find there's already a product that's already reached the market. So you click on the first three, do a little bit of research, and you think, okay, cool. You go and check some reviews out on a review website. Then you pick the brand that seems to have the best reviews, you go straight to their site, probably from the link that's on the review site, they come through as referral traffic, and then you might buy. Like, we only literally understand like the very end little bit of that journey, and there's this enormous part that we're missing that we really can't understand very much. But you might say that that's a cop-out, so work with what we've got, what can we do? And this is something really interesting that I've been working on in the last couple of weeks. I wanted to see how far could we take this with what we've got. So a very, very quick case study to try and do data-driven attribution on a shoestring budget. So with Google Analytics Premium, you've got data-driven attribution, you click a button, it's done for you, lovely. Not everybody's in that luxury position. So the steps I went through is I set up a custom dimension to record the cookie IDs, so the bit that identifies you as a user to Google Analytics. I set up user ID tracking as a custom dimension, so if the customer logs in on the website, I can see that they're a particular user, and if they log in on a different device, they'll have the same ID, which means that I can then connect those two cookies together. So that's effectively allowing cookie consolidation or cross-device tracking, there are lots of names for it. So then using the API, we can export this. Because we have the ID, we can now see each individual user in every session they had as one row of data. So this is very important. We need this level of data to be able to do data-driven attribution. The But that's quite big. If you think about all the visitors to your website over, say, a 30-day period or 90-day period, every single session they had is a new row. That's inevitably quite a lot of data. So we put it into BigQuery. BigQuery is very convenient. It's kind of like a database which is very easy to put data into, and then you can query it very, very quickly, and it performs well with very large data sets. So then we had to write some quite complex queries to get it all back out again, but in the right format. So there's lots of aggregations going on. You've got joins, trying to join the cookies and the user IDs together. And then finally, we had to learn a bit of statistics about Markov chains to build probabilistic models to estimate the uplift, or rather the detrimental impact of removing a channel from a particular path. So there's lots of simulations and things. It got quite complicated. This is a big, big leap from going from the Google Analytics interface to trying to do data-driven attribution and really understand the process and what's going on. And here's the end result. Amazing. So I've highlighted direct traffic, Google CPC, and Google Organics. Our touch point in this case is the source and medium dimensions in Google Analytics. Now the writing's very, very small, but the red bars here are the first touch. The purple is the data-driven model, and the green is the last click. And the arrows are shifted a little bit, but you can see the movement isn't particularly seismic. So Google CPC is perhaps a little bit undervalued based on last click. Google Organic is near enough the same. Direct is being overvalued based on the last click model. Cool, this is really exciting. We could go one step further. If we knew how much we're spending on each of these, we could work out CPA and efficiency, and that then starts to get a bit useful, because then we might say, oh, actually, paid media is performing a little bit harder than we thought it was. A little bit more efficient. We can maybe move some budget from one of these other channels into this. But we can't take budget from direct. No one spends marketing budget on direct traffic. So what else do we really do with this information? We could spend a long time going further into detail and doing more analysis to better understand, okay, well, which particular orders work better, and we could maybe go back. But ultimately, we can't really influence the way, or the order that consumers consume our media in. All we need to do is just make sure that there's this kind of bubble that is out there. Data-driven attribution can have some powerful results. There's some really interesting things that you can learn from it. But going from the Google Analytics last click, where you've got all these reports that are very, very detailed, very well laid out to you, to essentially just having to do all of the processing yourself in an external tool outside of Google Analytics, which isn't, only a very, very small part of the tool is built to do attribution modeling for you. And you need to really start looking into things like CRM, where you can consistently identify users, and you can start looking at lifetime value and user level conversion rates and potential lifetime value. And that's exciting stuff, but I consider that sitting outside of attribution. The other argument is that it's not necessarily uncommon. There's a particular case we had here. Less than 10% of users were converting on a last click. In this case, or in other cases that I've seen, you see 60–70% of users easily converting on a last click within a single session. And this means one or two things. That either attribution modeling is only really relevant for the minority, say the 30% that are converting on 2 or more sessions, or we have a technology problem, and that cookies just aren't good at identifying people. At the moment, we can't identify someone who browses on their mobile and then jumps to the desktop to convert. Although Google are launching a cross-device tracking feature in the next coming months, so keep your eyes peeled for that. So my challenge is data-driven attribution a must-have for everybody? Should everybody be doing it, as the market seems to be screaming? You look at all the media out there, all the publications talking about attribution. Are they really right, or is data-driven attribution just a nice-to-have for some? Is it the best use of our time and money? Well, I couldn't help but put this quote in. It's usually used in the context of big data, but attribution is like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. Everybody thinks everybody else is doing it, so everybody claims that they are doing it. That's kind of how I feel about attribution. It has its uses. There was also a survey that was launched literally in just the last few weeks, and this was a panel of 84 very senior, very experienced, very influential analysts within marketing. These are experts, they know their stuff, and they're in charge of big budgets too. And they said that their #1 thing that would occupy their time, attention and resources during 2017 is cross-channel measurement and attribution. My challenge is that really the best use of time, attention and resource in 2017? Or are there better ways that we can spend our time and money? It's an open question. Thank you.